Welcome to the Mommy's Zen podcast with Marianne Clyde.
Hi, this is Marianne Clyde. Welcome to another episode of the Mommy's Zen podcast. Our affirmation for today is I communicate clearly and effectively all my needs and desires. And today, to talk about good communication and things that we need to talk about when we're getting divorced or we're involved in family law is Alyssa Phillips.
How are you doing, Marianne?
Good. It's good to see you again. Thanks
Thank
for
you
coming back. We're going to talk a little bit today about the top trends in family law, because you tell me over the year you see different kinds of trends.
Absolutely.
And when you're talking about divorce in particular and family custody, and child custody in particular, you're noticing a couple things that are more and more prevalent these days.
That is true.
Absolutely. What are the top things you're seeing?
It's a good question. Interestingly enough, I think you see a lot of custody cases really near the spring and summertime. And I think a lot of that trend is probably because of, children getting out of school, and if parents want to make a move or do something, that's the right time to do it.
Oh,
so
they're
not
thinking as the summer's coming.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Some other trends I see, just as far as case law is concerned, or caseload I should say is concerned, is divorces. You see a lot of divorces springtime as well, and fall time. Not so much in the summer. I'm not so sure why.
That's interesting. I never really noticed that in my counseling practice when they happen, but that's
it's a little bizarre. Unless, of course, you're dealing with a divorce that children are involved, and then you see the same trend with custody and visitation.
Right.
But as far as cases, a trend that I see with cases, mainly dealing with custody cases, is you see a lot of relocation cases.
Yeah, and this was an interesting thing that you were telling me about, because it creates real, division in a family.
It really does. It really does, because when you're dealing with separation and divorce, a lot of times, especially in this area, parties cannot afford to stay in the area once the separation or divorce has occurred. And so you see them wanting to go closer to family or friends and moving away and relocating with the children, which obviously presents a lot of problems, because now, as you indicated, we're dealing with the division of the family.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes, and I understand with the economy the way it is, it's hard to stay in the area, but sometimes I think parents are too quick to want to jump to move somewhere because they have the security of others around them, not realizing how important it is for the children to be close to the other parent.
Right.
And so they don't consider the importance of the bond between the child and the other parent, and they're kind of quick to want to move.
And it's such a difficult topic, because I know clients in the past have talked about they work it into their separation agreement or the divorce decree that you're not allowed to move outside of this particular perimeter, and as you said, in this particular area of the world, and it's an expensive area to live in.
It really is.
And so that really traps parents who maybe can't find a job to make enough money to live in this area, and then they're looking for more child support or
that's a good point.
Or alimony or whatever. And so what's the best way that you find these days to handle that? I don't want my ex-spouse to move, period. I don't want them to take the kids.
Right.
But they can't afford to stay.
And
what do we do?
You see a lot of creativity, and I think the importance to be creative is to work together, whether that be through a mediator or what have you. The parents work together to be creative, because a lot of parents are quick to go to court. A court cannot be creative with a settlement, or with an order, or the division of assets and the custody of the children. So parents need to work together if they want to come with an outcome that's going to be in the best interest of the family.
So you're saying a court can't be creative. They can only deal within the law.
Absolutely.
They can't say, well, have you thought of doing this?
Absolutely. It's a good point. Courts
and
can't
that's
do
where
that.
a therapist or a mediator would come in to help if you're at odds.
Absolutely. Or
an attorney.
That therapist or mediator, absolutely. What a therapist, mediator, or an attorney can do is come up with maybe some creative solutions. Now, some of these solutions don't work for every case, but what you're starting to see parties do is try to keep the custodial parent in the marital home until the youngest child is graduated from high school. Now, again, that's difficult financially, some cannot do that, but what you're seeing is the parties are saying, we're going to put a hold on our division of the house until the youngest is graduated. We're going to divide everything else, but I want to keep the children in their same environment and come up with a solution that's least distracting to them.
So you're putting the kids first, which is
Very
huge.
important. Very important.
You know, in our last episode when we talked about the different mistakes that parents make in a divorce, they put themselves first and forget the kids. So this staying in the marital home is huge for stability for kids.
Yes, absolutely, because what parents sometimes don't realize is, although they're trying to keep the children out of the divorce and out of, you know, the decision making on what's going to happen, when the children realize that, okay, my parents are separated, they're going to get a divorce, there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that. And children, whether they express it or not, or they hold it inside, they are uncertain, what's going to happen to me? Where am I going to live? Am I going to have to change schools? Am I going to have to, you know, try to make new friends? And so I think it's important for the family as a whole to come together to say, how can we come up with a solution that's least distracting for these children? And it might not be staying in the formal marital residence. It might be, all right, let's come up with a support solution. Let's be creative on that ground to try to keep them within the area, not in the same home, but maybe within the area, so that way the children are still going to the same school.
Which is another huge thing, gives them the stability they need. Their friends, because when mom and dad are kind of unstable, at least they have the stability of the same friends, a similar neighborhood.
Good point.
And a lot of times I notice that when people get divorced and say mom or dad moves out with the kids, since you're splitting all the assets in half, you're downgrading your living circumstances.
That's true.
So they might live in a lesser neighborhood or a neighborhood that's you know, from a single family home to a apartment or something like that.
Absolutely.
And that's distracting for a kid too. I mean,
It
certainly
is.
kids are adaptable and certainly kids are flexible, but your idea of making the kids the priority of their stability is key.
It is key.
Whether you're moving out of state and if people move out of state, what kind of creative ways have you seen the visitation work?
It's a really good question. Depending on how far the parent goes, I've seen a parent move as far as Alaska with the children.
That's far.
And to kind of go back, just so you know, parents out there are aware, when you're dealing with a relocation, we're always in custody cases looking at the best interest of the child. But relocation, we're looking at two additional factors. We're looking at how are we going to keep the relationship between the non-custodial parent and the child going, and to make sure that this move does not impede in that relationship,
Right.
as well as, is there a direct benefit that this move has on the children? So when we talked about, you know, earlier, parents are leaving because they can't afford to be in the area, understand that that's not something, there's no trickle-down approach. If you can't afford it, then it must be a benefit for the children. There has to be a benefit. Now, obviously, going to be around family members, that's going to be a benefit because that encourages a relationship between the family members,
And cousins
extended. Absolutely. So that can be deemed a direct benefit to the child. But what we're seeing as far as the visitation to keep that bond going, depending again how far that parent is going, is to at least have quarterly visitations.
Okay.
And then in the summer, that's where you're really seeing the bulk of the visitation to the non-custodial parent.
Like maybe 6 weeks with the non-custodial parent instead of every other weekend.
Absolutely. And so, although it's hard because during the school year you're losing that time, you're gaining the time in the summer with the children. And so, in essence, you're creating that bond with them. And I think it's important. I think that children over the age of 5, it's easier for them at that age to be able to go a longer period of time without being with a parent. And so we can do that quarterly visit with the summer, and that's not going to impede in their bond. I think what is going to be interesting is when we're dealing with the age 0 to 5, because that's the time when children are really creating their bond. And so you really want that short, frequent duration with both parents. And when you see relocation with that, that makes it very difficult.
Do you see some creative stuff with that? Maybe Skype visits from time to time, weekly Skype visits, or little care packages, or snail mail, letters and cards and things like
Good
that.
point. Absolutely. You see Skype. We have FaceTime now. They do the
right,
FaceTime, the Skype, same concept. And they get that face-to-face with the children. Not necessarily that physical contact, but they can see the children, they can see their emotions and talk to them, see that they're doing good and they're healthy and all that. I think, again, given the distance, what we're seeing at 0 to 5 to have that frequent contact is you're seeing the parents really putting themselves out there to create that contact. I've got a case now where they live 6 hours away and they meet every other weekend. And what they do is dad, who's a non-custodial parent in this case, will on his off weekends, he will, or every other weekend I should say, he's either going to go to North Carolina to visit them or they're going to come to Virginia every other weekend to visit him. So they're not necessarily meeting in the middle and always coming to Virginia. Dad comes and visits them, so they have 2 weeks of being in North Carolina before they have to travel to Virginia. And it's the parents really putting the child, in that situation where they're going to have that contact. Yeah, they're going up and down the road, but what parents don't realize is being in the car, you're still creating, you're
a bond.
talking.
Sure, it's easier to talk sometimes when you're in the car.
Absolutely.
As long as nobody in the back seat's screaming, it's easier to talk.
I was about to say, yeah, children say the darndest things too. You're in the car and all of a sudden they'll tell you about what's going on at school or daycare. And it's a good time. They don't realize being in the car is, a time that it's one-on-one.
Right.
That they don't necessarily have in the house when the child's off playing or with friends or what have you.
I like the way that you focus on the positive and the benefits, and I would encourage parents even to focus on how the time away from the kid is beneficial to you as well. Very often I hear parents say, oh, I can't be without my kid. I'm so depressed when my kid's not there. But the fact of the matter is that's a great time to get together with friends. It's a great time to go away for the weekend. It's a great time to sit in the quiet and actually read a book.
Absolutely.
And so I would encourage parents to really concentrate on what's good about this. If you don't like the whole situation, that's understandable. But what is good about parts of this is really important.
And I think you touched on a really good point. Parents don't realize, use this time to work on yourself.
Right.
Because what makes you happy? Because if a parent's happy, the children are going to see that and the children are going to be happy.
Right.
And a lot of parents don't see that. They see the sadness and the loss of my children are not with me. Work on yourself. Do something that you enjoy doing, a hobby that you don't have time to do when the kids are around.
Great suggestion. Now, was there another trend that you see in divorces that we want to cover quickly before we close up?
Not necessarily in divorces, but I think you're seeing this a lot in custody cases, grandparents' rights.
Yes.
I get that a lot. I get a lot of times, the grandparents coming to me and saying, what are my rights? And the unfortunate thing, and in these situations, the grandparents are really raising the children. And all of a sudden, mom or dad, they're not stable, they're coming back and they're saying, okay, I want my child back. And the grandparents, not that they want to raise children again, but they don't see that it's in the best interest for these children to go back in the situation mom and dad are in. And so they see themselves fighting for custody of the children.
With their own children.
With their own children.
Which is tragic.
Absolutely. And so, and they try to convey, look, when you get to a certain point where you're on your feet, you've got a stable job and a home environment, then raise your child, absolutely. But until then, they're going to stay here in a stable environment.
Come see them anytime.
Right. But it's hard for parents because they feel like, I have a right. I'm a parent and you can't tell me what I should do for my child. And the unfortunate thing for the grandparents is that they now, because there's a presumption in the law, a natural parent presumption, they now have to overcome that presumption, which is very difficult. They've got to show by clear and convincing evidence that the parents have abandoned the child, that they have a previous order that divests them of their natural parent presumption.
Oh my goodness. So
it's very difficult.
All the more reason for adults to act like adults.
It's a very good point.
To keep the kids' well-being at the center of the reasoning for all this. And then make the sacrifices and concessions even if the divorce wasn't their idea.
Right.
Which is where a lot of the resistance comes. Not my fault. I'm not going to, he owes me, she owes me. The whole point is this is the way it is, whether you like it that way or not.
Absolutely.
And it's really, really difficult, absolutely, and it's really, really hurtful, absolutely. But if you keep the kids as a priority, as you've mentioned, and not using them as pawns, and not putting yourself in a position where you're at odds now with your own parents over custody.
Absolutely.
That's really, really hurtful for
Absolutely.
everybody.
And really, the parents, the grandparents in the situation should be commended for stepping up because, again, they didn't expect to have to raise children again. When their children left and they started their own family, they didn't figure that we're going to have to be in that role again.
Right.
So they don't choose to be in this role, and I think it's important for parents to realize that. They're doing what they think is in the best interest of the child, and they hope that the parents will come in and do the same.
Right, right. So let's all be a grown-up.
Absolutely. I mean, that really is it's a simple, it seems very simple rule.
Not so easy.
But not so easy for some people
Right.
because, again, they're so emotionally involved, they don't see the larger picture of what's going on here, what's really in the best interest of the children. And unfortunately, their emotions take over and they decide based upon their emotions.
Wow. Well, Alyssa, I really like your approach, the positive approach, the look for the benefits, the keep the kids a priority, and to be a grown-up.
Absolutely.
Really great advice. Thank you so. That's right. Thank you for being my guest. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And we're going to put Alyssa's website where you can contact her at the bottom of the screen so that you can contact Alyssa Phillips with Mark B. Williams Law Offices if you are experiencing some sort of difficulty in your family. She's the one to call. So this is Marianne Clyde from the Mommy Zen podcast, reminding you of our affirmation for today is that I communicate clearly and effectively all my needs and desires. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Mommy Zen podcast. For nuggets of encouragement and strength throughout your day, follow Marianne on Twitter at mommy_zen and Facebook at facebook.com/mommyjustbreathe. Also, you can join our mailing list, leave comments, or ask questions by visiting mommy-zen.com.